You are looking at the vast acreage of apple orchards by the Peter Rice homestead on Elm Street in Marlboro. And now, well, you won't be doing any apple picking down there in the fall, especially with $4.95. That could get a little dangerous. Hi, I'm Dan Ginden, and you are about to experience living history. Today on Living History, we're talking about, among other things, the Peter Rice homestead. And just like the city of Marlboro, this homestead has a very rich history. But first, the Peter Rice homestead is the home base for the Marlboro Historical Society. And it's got some pretty cool artifacts in it too. But once upon a time, it was the home of a well-known family in Marlboro. Since 1688, this home has sat on this hill, seeing everything Marlboro has had to offer over 350 years. It has seen battles, it's seen families and tragedies. It has seen Marlboro grow from a small farming community to a hub of successful business ventures, from shoes to apples and beyond. It was a garrison and later an early-day apartment complex. Now it houses some of Marlboro's most cherished artifacts.
It's kind of at the intersection of the early colonial life in Marlboro, both its geography and its history.
The Rice name is one for the Mount Rushmore of Marlboro. Edmund Rice was part of a small group of Sudbury residents who petitioned the General Court in 1656 to settle a new plantation that would accommodate their families, which were growing year by year. Edmund's son Thomas had 13 children with his wife Mary while still living in the town of Sudbury. They received a land grant in Sudbury and Marlboro. It would be the acreage in Marlboro that would create the land controversy of 1663.
But it involved everybody in town, and half of the town, most of them connected to the Ward family, is on one side of the issue, and the other, the Rice family and those connected with the Rice family. And these two great families in Marlboro are at odds with one another.
It was not unheard of for there to be battles for land in colonial times. Many times the surveying tools used would lead to inaccurate readings. Written documents would be missing as well. If you think today's legal system is error-inflicted, be happy you didn't live back then. Marlboro royalty was at the center of this fight, and the Wards and Howes claiming rights to the Rice property. Not long after the controversy ended, Thomas dies and leaves half of his land in Marlboro to his son, Peter, who would build a home there. Not the size it is today, but a modest-sized home for the time.
Probably no more than what we would think of as a shack or a cabin on the property where it is now. And in the ensuing years, he builds upon it. He has 11 children. He's probably building a little bit more to manage his large family. What we now think of as the Peter Rice house was probably built around 1710.
As Peter and his wife Rebecca grew their family to the tune of 11 children, the house itself would start to grow to make room for more residents. Peter was running a full working farm with cattle, sheep, horses, and hogs. The Rice family grew crops of corn, rye, barley, wheat, flax, and oats. True to one of the great businesses of Marlborough's past, the Rice property, which extended into the town of Northborough, had an apple orchard for the purpose of making cider. In 1711, the Rice home was designated as a garrison house due to the French and Indian Wars. Still a home, but now included as a fortified refuge, it is assumed that the house was surrounded by a log palisade type of fence. When it came to battles in this war, Marlborough was a hotbed.
A number of abductions, a number of murders by Indians among the what was still a frontier town.
Even with the fear of attack, the Rice farm needed to be run in order to sustain life. With 11 children, the Rices probably didn't have much need for hired help or slaves to run the farm. As the years passed on, Peter's youngest son, Abraham, would take over not only as his parents' caregivers, but he would also build onto the homestead in 1735. Rebecca passed away at the age of 81, and Peter died at 95 in 1753. The house would be handed down again when Abraham deeded it to his son, Peter. Then it would go to Peter's son, Eli, who was known as Deacon in Marlborough. He served as magistrate and a selectman, and in 1846 he became the state senator for the area. When the deacon died in 1850, his oldest daughter, Lavina, took over the home. Lavina was married to Otis Russell. They made a life there with their 17 children. As the house moved on to other owners with the name of Fitch, McLeod, and LaBelle, one Russell child remained. Sophronia Russell, like two of her siblings, Austin and Herbert, never married and continued to live in the homestead. In 1894, the house was sold out of the family to Ernest Fitch. Sophronia, who was weakened by health issues, stayed on and was a welcomed favorite aunt until she died in 1903. In the 1900s, this home, that at one time only had Rice blood living in its walls, would change ownership 5 times, culminating in the Honeywell Company deeding it to the Marlborough Historical Society in 1968.
We believe now that, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to structure our new lease in such a way that we'll be able to get grant money to make improvements to the house.
Now this house not only shows off its own history, but that too of all the family donations it's received throughout the decades from Marlborough residents. It's become a treasure trove of this city's long and proud past. We're going to take a right now and head into the town of Northborough, where the White Cliffs has been standing since the late 1800s. And recently, it was just saved from demolition. What is the town of Northborough to most Marlborough inhabitants? It's the town next door. What should it be to all Marlborough residents? Our sister or brother community. Why? Northborough was once a part of Marlborough before it broke off in 1766. It became more and more difficult for people to make Sunday services all the way over here, so it made more sense to break off and create a closer meeting house. So Northborough became its own town. People started raising their families here. They created businesses here. The town was built up. One structure that came along in the late 1880s was the White Cliffs. Daniel Wesson began construction of what was to be a summer home in 1882. And yes, Wesson, as in firearms manufacturers Smith & Wesson. At this point in time, Daniel was 61 years old, so his life didn't take shape during the building of the mansion we know today, but it was back in his teens.
His father had him apprenticed to his older brother, Edwin. Edwin was a rifle maker, a very famous rifle maker in Northborough, Massachusetts. So they were born in Worcester, and he apprenticed with his brother in Northborough. Lo and behold, he met his future wife, who lived in Northborough. That's the connection of White Cliffs being in Northborough. It's certainly not a beachfront property or anything like that. He ended up buying his wife's parents' land. He built a mansion on their land.
Wesson and his wife-to-be, Cynthia Hawes, eloped due to Cynthia's father's refusal to give his blessing to a man he found to be a mere gunsmith with no future. History would show that Daniel's father-in-law would be wrong. However, in the beginning, his feelings proved prophetic.
So he followed his brother when he moved his business into Connecticut. His brother, however, died shortly after at the age of 37. So Daniel inherited the company, but it wasn't very stable, and he lost the company and he had to seek other employment.
Wesson met Horace Smith in Vermont. Smith, a fellow gunsmith, took a liking to Daniel, and the feeling was mutual. They set up a company together, complete with patents. Unfortunately, this business also failed for Daniel.
They sold the technology to Winchester. Winchester at the time was a manufacturer of clothing. This is the Winchester of Winchester rifles. And he ended up, I think it's the Winchester repeating rifle, actually uses the mechanism that was designed by Daniel Wesson and Smith. So they came into other areas with their technology.
Fate would have these two entrepreneurs cross paths just a few years later. This time, they created a cartridge for a small handgun. For the first time, the bullet and the gunpowder were in the cartridge together.
Then they designed a gun special for that cartridge. So they patented both, they cornered the market. They started producing this in a small factory, I think it was like 25 people out in Springfield. And when the Civil War broke out, that's when they started to make mass production, make a lot more money, a lot more profits, and they built another manufacturing facility in Springfield with on the order of 500 people. So they grew really fast.
Soon, Daniel Wesson became the richest man in Springfield. Take that, dearest daddy-in-law. When Cynthia's parents passed away, Daniel bought the land where his deceased in-laws lived, along with some neighboring property, totaling about 6 acres. Cynthia was the catalyst behind the purchase. She wanted a summer home, and Daniel was more than willing to build her one. And, as was his way, Daniel spared no expense.
It has something like 17 fireplaces, and they're all there. It's some 35 rooms. Each room was built with different wood from different parts of the world. They claim that he had built furniture to match the wood in the interior of the different rooms. We brought in people from Europe to do the construction, and it's unbelievable what's there for all the millwork. And there's little details that someone had to point out to me that you don't see when you just walk through. If you're in the room that was built with oak, all the engravings are oak leaves and acorns. If you're in the room that was built with maple, it's all maple leaves, all carved into the wood. And it's very impressive.
Also on the site were carriage roads, ponds with fountains, and a large greenhouse. There were also houses Wesson had built for his employees that took care of their summer home.
When Daniel built the mansion, there was no public water supply in town. He needed, for the amount of water he needed for his building, for his ponds, and all of the plants that he was putting in the greenhouse, he needed his own water supply. So he raised the level of Bartlett Pond 3 feet, built a dam, and what comes out of Bartlett Pond is a stirrup brook. As it came out, he built a pump house, and he pumped the water from the pump house about a mile up to the hill that's essentially a half a mile from White Cliffs, and it's a slightly higher hill than White Cliffs. If you go back there, I never knew this, but there's a cistern back there in somebody's backyard. It's in the ground, but you have to know it's there. He pumped it up there, and then it gravity fed another probably half a mile to feed all the water into his mansion. I mean, that's a huge engineering feat. Think about all the plumbing that had to be done to get the water where it needed to go. So there are tunnels rumor has it that there are tunnels between the main building and his worker bee houses across on Main Street, that there are tunnels connecting all of this. So there's a lot of other things you don't see and appreciate. It's all those stone walls. People keep driving by these stone walls and why are they there? He built those stone. Those are his boundary markers. And they're very far away from his current property.
After Daniel and Cynthia passed on, for Daniel it was 1906 when he succumbed to heart failure after a 4-year battle, their children were all living in Springfield. There was no family interest in Wesson Terrace, as it used to be called. There ended up being several owners over the years, but there was one that made the former summer home into what it is now known for from a historical standpoint.
In the 1940 time frame or 1950s, the Tomiolo family purchased it, and then they converted it into a restaurant, and many people in the town of Northborough are very familiar with that. They just remember that as quite a hot spot during that time.
The large function room off the back of the building was added in the 1960s. In the 1980s, the LaCava family purchased it and have been the owners until now. They have put the White Cliffs up for sale. After all the functions held here over the decades, this beautiful building has been closed.
They were losing money on it, it's as simple as that. So they preferred to take their business. They also own the Best Western in Marlborough, so they have a function facility there with all the amenities of a hotel, so they focus it on that now.
Now, the White Cliffs faces an uncertain future. Forget about whether it will ever open its doors again as a function facility. It may be demolished. That has many in the town of Northborough on the edge of their seats, hoping one of the most recognizable landmarks on Route 20 is not relegated to a date with a wrecking ball.
You know, it really is a nice building. I'm glad they were able to save it. If you want to find out more about the White Cliffs, you can visit their Facebook page. We're going to take a quick break while I go back over the town line into Marlborough, but first, here's your living history pop quiz question.
And now it's time for the living history pop quiz question of the day. The question is, which former Desperate Housewife star grew up in Marlborough? Is it A, Marcia Cross, B, Terry Hatcher, or C, Felicity Huffman? We'll have the answer for you later in the program.
That's low.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. Stop the texts. Stop the wrecks. Visit us at stoptextstoprex.org.
I'll be watching every single day, and every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay. I'll be watching you.
You are watching Living History. If you've just joined us, we've been through the history of the Peter Rice homestead, and we went over the town line to talk about the White Cliffs. Now we're back here in Marlborough to talk, well, we're going to talk some turkey.
The national holiday of Thanksgiving has been observed through stories and different presidential proclamations dating all the way back to the times of the Pilgrims. I think we all know by now that Squanto and other Indians didn't sit down to eat turkey with the starving Pilgrims. They may have watched John Madden call the first game between the Lions and Bears, though.
And boom!
We're still working on the validity of that story.
Love to eat turkey, 'cause it's good. Love to eat turkey like a good boy should, 'cause it's turkey to eat. So good.
All right, this is getting out of hand. The point of the story is, did you know that among the shoes and apple orchards that Marlborough was once known for, that there was another well-known business in town?
Down in Mellow Lane, memories are there. Look just like a painting that my uncle did. covered pumpkins and the smell of apple pie make me reminisce of a day living on the farm.
If you grew up in Marlboro, you might remember taking a school field trip to see the turkeys at Mellow Lane Farm. Or maybe your family's Thanksgiving or Christmas turkey came from here. George Mello bought this property, at the time 128 acres worth, on Stowe Road in 1942, which was a dairy farm at the time with a side business of an apple orchard. In 1943, George's grandmother gave him 12 turkeys for the farm.
My great-grandmother bought us some turkeys from a place in Southborough called DeWatt's Turkey Farm. And that was the beginning. See, we're Portuguese and Italian. My great-grandmother was obviously Portuguese, and she knew Mrs. DeWatt.
There are a lot of people that started small farms, and one of them were turkey farms. There are quite a few turkey farms in Massachusetts.
Dad got very interested in it because it was a burgeoning industry that was just starting, and it was during the war. And you know, meat during the war was very difficult to come by. So he saw some potential in starting a turkey farm. And all of a sudden, you know, this is the big thing that was going on.
Even though George Mello grew up on a farm and then bought this one, he was a musician by trade. The turkey business? That was a side dish. Although this trumpeter's heart was in both gigs.
He would do work here at the farm, and then I always remember him going and getting changed into his tuxedo to go into Boston. He played in a lot of the big hotels, and at that time it was in the 50s, so it was big bands. And but he didn't travel that much. He did mostly Boston.
While the turkey farm was there in the early years, along with the cows, horses, and a riding school, it wasn't until the 1950s that the turkey farm really became a prime portion of the family business. Those World War II years in the 40s were quite forming, though.
So a lot of people were eating turkey because they were being raised right here in Marlboro. So his business really took off during the war, where other businesses really wasn't, you know, because they had food rationing, you had sea rations, you had cards that people had. They were spending all their money on for the war, and they had, of course, they had to feed the troops over there too, and stuff like that. So here you had a local turkey farm with all kinds of turkeys, so you could buy turkeys, and so turkeys were very popular during World War II, so around here anyways.
With the help of his wife, Louise, and daughter, Judy, George's turkey business was really taking off.
It was very limited in that it was Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that was the end of it, you know. And they started again in the spring, and it was it was like part-time almost, but they developed a very nice clientele. People, you know, started to understand that they could get a fresh turkey someplace, which is very interesting because now it's all fresh this and fresh that and natural this and natural that. And we were doing that for years, just years.
In the early 60s, George and Louise Mello were ready to retire from the business. David took over in 1966. That is when the business really started to boom with many different kinds of products. More barns were built on the property, and a country store was added.
That's when I started to open up the farm and make it a big difference as far as the kind of business it is became a full-time operation. So full-time with turkeys, so you've got to do something on the off-season, and it was raising pumpkins. We had pick your own strawberries. We had all kinds of things going on.
Soon, the items that have become legendary around these parts, making mouths water, were being made. The turkey pies, that special stuffing, dessert pies, donuts, jams, everything at Mellow Lane Turkey Farm was made from scratch.
I remember going down there almost every year, get turkey, you know. A lot of times you had to wait in line. Sometimes there were even a policeman there. You know, I remember those days.
The products became very important. People would come here for pies, lots of pies. I don't remember how many David will tell you. Hundreds and hundreds of pies went out of here, and the turkey pies and the apple pies. But it was a fabulous business, very good.
Morrow family members started working there in the 1970s. Dan Morrow started developing a catering service that turned into the Buffet Way. When a business starts to fade, ownership decides it's time to call it a day. David decided it was time to call it a day, but not because business faded. It was still doing very well. Why did he close down?
Well, I was tired. You know, and I was pushing 70. I wanted out of here. That was it. So, and the unfortunate part of it is that there couldn't be any continuity to it because my children didn't want any part of it. They had other things that they were doing. Her kids had different lives, and it was not anything that I could pass on to somebody within the family. And I wasn't going to sell it to somebody that wasn't family. That wouldn't cut it. I couldn't do it.
The spirit, determination, and hard work of the Mello family is imprinted all over this land. But it's this structure that remains a landmark, a heartbeat of what this farm was.
That structure over there is an iconic structure. I have found, one year we went up into the attic of the farm, of the barn rather, and we saw Roman numerals cutting into one of the wind braces. And it was 1832. As we interpreted it. That's when this barn was built. That's a long time ago. You know, when you consider it, and it's still standing and it's still viable, it's a wonderful, you got to take your hat off to the people that built things like that in those days. It's all pegs, all, you know, post and beam constructed in these. I mean, it withstood a couple of hurricanes. It never goes anyplace.
Judy took over the country store area of the barn to build her current calligraphy business.
I sort of developed that into, I call it a studio, where I have my calligraphy is displayed. I have a small business that I do calligraphy for weddings and other occasions.
The Mellos did a lot of business on this farm over parts of 6 decades. They also did a lot of living for a family that started out as city folks in Belmont, but really took on the role of country folk.
We moved to this big thing here, which is, you know, a lot of space. It was wonderful growing up on a farm. If I could make every kid grow up on a farm, this is the way I would do it.
Are you looking for the answer to the pop quiz question? Are you feeling confident? Here you go.
Earlier, we asked you the living history pop quiz question of the day. It was, which former Desperate Housewives star grew up in Marlboro? The choices were A, Marcia Cross, B, Terry Hatcher, or C, Felicity Huffman. The answer is A, Marcia Cross. This Marlboro High School graduate got her first professional acting gig in 1984 on the daytime soap opera The Edge of the Night. No, I've never heard of it either. Cross has over 60 acting credits in TV movies and TV series.
If you have any historical stories that you'd like to see us cover, just shoot us an email. We'd be more than happy to work on it. I'm Dan Ginden, and we are Living History.